Hi, so thank you so much for coming and giving me this time to talk about myself and my art, which for me are really of a piece. And my art, at least right now, is a lot about identity. And that's in part due to the way that my brain works. And so the way I make my writing, my artwork, everything, my whole artistic practice is sort of premised on collage and bringing together disparate elements to make a new whole that is sort of recontextualized and has a different meaning. So my artwork is made from pieces of other people's work, and my writing is likewise sort of made from a combination of appropriated, edited, recontextualized, contextualized language. And better than me speaking about all of it, I thought maybe I'd start by sharing some of my writing, and this was done during the pandemic. So this seems like a good enough place to start. The blinds are drawn. The pictures hang on the walls in silence. The whole situation feels fuzzy, unclear, crusted over. I know this is impossible, but in the remote air, there seems to be a general, implicit agreement that nobody will talk to me, and I will talk to nobody. There is something very Kant-like, I used to think, about smoking. Well, and it aids focus. But even cigarette in hand, a ghastly balloon of smoke hovering about, the many details which might once have comprised a unified whole, fail to congeal and lack vitality. Softly hiccuping, I try not to move, because moving hurts. I let a snail wander across my palm and think that it feels good to be something's protector. Then, too, what makes a snail vulnerable is the selfsame source of its exquisite acuity. Its silky, squishy parts are arrayed for the purposes of a delicate, sophisticated, tactile detection. The snail, of course, is more than just a prettily adorned mollusk. He is the classic paradigm of an existentialist anti-hero, glistening and beautiful, easy to admire, but hard to like. I find I can scarcely utter a sound, and my heart misses a beat whenever an engine turns over, or when someone is careful, sparing, or, God forbid, kind. Taken all around, my heart misses more beats than it ticks. Winds and waves have set fitfully against me. Gravity no longer holds sway. At the very center of my being, a red sun, enveloped in a dusty pink haze, glimmers and winks like a dragon's eye. There is no hinterland or context. A flapping, swirling creature rises and beats her wings. It is past time to wake up, well past time. Seeing this, I feel frivolous, apathetic, and insufficiently sharp, like a warm beer. Intended for the sky, I am ungainly on the ground. The good doctor issues an ultimatum. I have exhausted myself in efforts to have her suitably placed. They have all come to naught. I don't want to have her dumped, destroyed, melted, or whatever may happen, without giving you a chance to say a final word. Ah, you see, this happens to me with everything, every day. Yet, against the odds, I'm still here. That is to say, before long, I find myself going on in the usual way, as it were, roaming the streets, relentlessly hazy, in obscurity and silence, gazing as if through a peephole, rather strangely upwards, at the moon. So I'll stop there for a minute, and for me, what I've just read sounds dissociated from reality, and I think that had a lot to do with mood I was in during the pandemic, because I spent it in New York City, and it was still isolating, but in a very strange way. And I think that the art that I made during that time sort of reflects the sense of unreality, dissociation from society, from self. Um, and I wrote a lot during the pandemic. Um, and the way I write, as I said, is similar to the way I make my art. And so it's sort of it's making sense from chaos, or curating a selection of words and phrases, and then or images, and then altering them and combining them in a way that feels like it reflects me or myself. Um, and my writing sort of runs the gamut from this kind of prose poetry, and I've got a book in progress also that's tentatively titled, Instead of a Memoir, a Novel. So that way I get away with telling my own story, but not having any of the legal responsibility for what I say. Um, so I wanted to read another little bit here. Oh yeah, here we go. This was also a poem that I did during the pandemic. Um, so um, I'm tired of the news. If we were jellyfish, theoretically, we might comfortably listen to the unspooling of all that is gentle, abstract, and simple. But our romance with those loud-mouthed business and policy elites has soured of late, as they accommodate their collective iron will and ambition to a self-serving, opportunistic flux of cruel impulses. They shine their infuriating light so bright, you'd swear nothing else was visible in the thicket of thorny gravitas overtaking our general shipwreck, least of all, a way home. Not to be outdone by one another, each media guru, each luminary, plays synchronously. I'm going to skip that word because I don't see that happening. Plays at both mark and marksman, taking aim with malice and envy, trustless of human experience. Some of them are laughing, some are crying, but they are all delusional, postmodern cliches, socially produced and smoothly packaged, swerving all the while between madcap farce and grim atrocity, unknowing, ungodly men. I am familiar with the sordid ways institutions escape responsibility, and I'm only spitballing here, but the newsman's buttered charm is just the sort of unjustified, unjustifiable digression I feel worming about the heart of my own toasted, pitiful story. Don't you see? I am the mob. I assert right of title. I claim authority. I profess control. Apparently, all things considered, it's not so hard to destroy a democracy or a person. My intellectual position is a thing of shreds and tatters. My ideas are vacuous to the point of non-existence. Staff are credible witnesses. Patients are not. So, and I'll take you on another little journey from another piece of writing here. So, if you are reading this as you are making toast in your pajamas, in a stupor, or awake, prowling across a twilight rubble of dull, wayward madness and monsters, or battered, slowly and painfully, by a private dissonance of unimaginable grief, or whether you are beyond this place, in the frozen vacuum of the dead, remember, some things make sense only when looked at years later, once skimmed over by the fingertips of time. Those clawing digits closely and cleverly grip the murky, smudged-up places, pulling together, cleaning and folding, what feels now like a process of otherworldly retribution or a biblically bad cosmic joke, so that the story may develop a horizon-wide brushstroke of logic. I see how you're looking at me, with bemused skepticism. Nonetheless, settle down, even with a handful of plots in the air, in the midst of this churning storm of shit. I guess we have to bleep that out.
No.
Okay. In the midst of this churning storm of shit, the seeds you've sown have been growing away, out of sight, connecting moments of absurdity and disillusion to that inch of irrational want that carries us through our daily life. Expressions of love toward the world, toward humanity. Which is not to say my perceptions are not distorted. So often we rose tint the events which fate spits at us, forcing us to engage. Heaven answers our prayers with a handful of dust, and we swallow it down, sweetly. At least in the forest, everything is arbitrary. I'm thankful for this great oak tree, wordless, cyclical, and spontaneous, where I bury all the things that need burying. There's no attempt at redemption here. How could there be? For now, the war is all there is. Up close, it's a slashing crosshatch of colors that at its densest becomes its own medium, like night. It slides toward oppression in the same way lost souls fly up from candlelight, dragging Mother Remembrance by the hair, down a worm-eaten staircase of aberrant actualities. I know a lot of people think all I think about is pie. Just as they seem to be endlessly occupied with revolutionizing themselves. But where I'm standing, the land is trembling. When little feels substantial in my day spent alone, frozen in bed, I want to keep saying to myself, we are fine, we are fine, we are fine, we are fine, in an effort to suppress an insidious, blasphemous little wrinkle, trying to enact a revolution. It billows with icy ardor. I am unhappy doing so many things alone. I have nobody to talk to. I cannot tolerate being so alone. I feel as if nobody really understands me. I am no longer close to anyone. There is no one I can turn to. Today's exercises are a branch I'm clinging to after falling off a cliff. That is the only justification for my nerve, peeling and caramelizing a stammering, unstable stream of sentimental allegory, and other tinctures, stronger still, baking and flipping the poorly hatched egg of sanguine comfort in a desperate search for grace. All the while, I bob in the murk, with horror, with beauty, with violence. My point is this. I feel like a presumptuous fool when I try to think differently. I swallowed whole an iron bullet of good intentions, under the delusion that I was a mechanical god, an omniscient chemist, titrating my own micro-universe. What a jerk. We are never finished with grief. It is part of the fabric of living. In the stillness, I walk around the smallest shadow with 1,000-mile stare. But then, at that exact dispirited moment, when it seems no one at all realizes I micro-leathery wings and escape this rhythm, this form so full of holes, death zips by with a mingled smell of salt and rot, and I am reminded, watching the lint rise and fall, that I'm alive. I've nowhere else to go. Why not now go towards the thing I love? So I slog on, a nut-brown hedgehog, panting and mud-caked, skulking in the drizzle of the in-between. While I'm reading, you're going to see some images of my art, and these collages were made at the same time as the writing, which was pandemic time. So they reflect the same sort of mood or thought process that was going on in my writing, I think is represented visually in the art. So, okay. I understand your kindness sought to integrate me with society. It was a gift made freely, in contempt of circumstance. But I am an annoyance to them, and they are, in the end, insupportable to me. Leave me alone in my corner. I will be happy here. It is dim and quiet, dark and deserted, all-encompassing and narrow. Oh, what a stressful time! If you don't fall in with my subterfuges, how are we ever going to get together? I should like to be very patient and concentrate exceedingly hard, but in light of the short time available, and given the limited resources and lack of information, and due to the hostility shown by the target and the corresponding impossibility of obtaining proper documentation, etc., etc., is it any surprise I've been pushed to stage the occasional garish provocation? So, we all come from somewhere, each with our own means or lack thereof. I recognize I am an improbable bird, assembled from a mass of conflicting parts belonging to others. A dodo here, a seagull there, a wingspan from some prehistoric specimen. I know. Obviously, if birds are metaphorical human beings, and dogs are metonymical human beings, then it stands to reason starfish may be thought of as metonymical inhuman beings. What exactly am I? Why, I'm a starfish, darling. Is it wrong, dangerous even, to be a woman wielding power? Sorry, I'm going to take that line again. It is wrong, dangerous even, to be a woman wielding power. So I've gone and written myself an epic, in a way that is pat and tendentious, but hopefully still persuasive. You think me unnatural, a wrinkly old bat, with moods amassed and simmering in my pupils, my hair begloomed and directed comically sideward, then later hatcheted mostly away. Well, I think it's a very irrelevant criterion for me to be, for example, attractive. Here I am, entirely gray, and nonetheless indomitable. Still, this isn't all my fault. The virus is my new partner. Walks are to be limited, no congregations. After unpacking the groceries, run and wash your hands, then wash them again, then pray to whichever God you pray to. And don't panic. These things happen. Of course, it's wonderful to fund the arts. It's wonderful, you're wonderful. The arts are so nice and wonderful. But really, I say, let's give all the money, every last fucking dime, to science. If I could, I would collapse all the myriad possibilities of my life with a surgical directness, etching into the vapors a single blunt conclusion. So I'm going to skip to this guy here. Sometimes, when it's hard to concentrate, and I'm overwhelmed by the creeping suspicion that I am nothing but an imaginary character, or rather an earlier self and latter self, the latter lending a hand to the former, I like to recite John Donne, aloud. That, says his lordship, scratching his armpit, is because you're a lesbian. Fat chance, on multiple counts. The pragmatist Charles Saunders Peirce wrote at the close of the 19th century, "It is not too much to say that after the passion to learn, there is no quality so indispensable to the successful prosecution of science as imagination." The irony of all ironies, then, is that the world is closer to what many might regard as science fiction than to science. Why, even on a warm, still summer's day, foul weather may roll in with alarming alacrity, like flashes on a silent film. But then, there are times we feel ourselves whole. We stand at the center of our experience, and something inside us flares into simple, airy clarity. Everyone knows that hours spent at home, not working, are a giant waste of time, and that death is a process that disintegrates into actions, and actions thence into phases. That's why, in all the ways that really matter, I'm angry at myself for not becoming a mother, for wanking, for my awful presence and corporeality, for my subtle scarred edifice, roiled by anger, grief, and confusion, for my desire and ruthless rapacity, for my open mouth and extended hand. If I am not mistaken, you, my friend, seem to be endowed with the perfect degree of mental vacuity required of an eminent artifact. What shall I call thee? Hyacinth for thy eyes, or lily for thy pose? I can't help noting the pervasive feeling that somewhere someone is having a more authentic experience. This is a playful, yet serious work. While my inclination is generally to be as ambivalent as possible, even the fact-checkers must concede the effects of Father Time on Mother Earth. Beaches become cliffs, and cliffs flatten into beaches. On this basis, stratum of limestone and flinty blue slate reveal a story told by the ghost shadows of ancient walls and citadels. Stacked one on top of another, through meters of dirt, they fan out in curling slices, delineating their lineage through lush, swaying fields. Glimpsing these ruins, convincing evidence of things having gone horribly wrong, one appreciates Saunders, a 2012 neologism from the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. It's the sudden realization that we're all going through the same shit. Anyone who does not feel the significance of this, I have to ask, who are you? Where have you been? For context, let us remember, our nighttime routine did not always include insomnia, or a fascination with sticky sweet goop. My dear weird woman, my dear odd fellow, I wanted that jam. But I knew what we all knew. I wasn't going to get conserved lemons in the midst of a lockdown. Preserving fruits is just physics, and the relevant equations are well known. The recipe goes, if this, then that, and if that, then the other thing. And yet, despite my possessing this knowledge, and much more besides, it has been said by some that I always choose wrong, that I am marked out to lose, and with too much of a barbarous spirit ever to admit it. In point of fact, some soul came round, doing a survey on trauma, only to say mine wasn't typical, but persisted in a more complex, tedious, and oppressive form, like a power cut up top, so that I go through life picking my way slowly downward, feeling the walls with my hands. Indeed, I had suspected I was a monstrous child, die Schwein, the type to be always unhappy, in petty and enigmatic ways, and now the leadership has confirmed as much. Usually when I'm making a collage I love going to bookstores, so part of my process of making the collages is I go to bookstores and I get old used art books and old used art catalogs. And when I'm home, the way that I'm inspired really with my visual art and with my writing is by looking at other people's work and finding something that speaks to me in some way. And I've been using increasingly images that are very well known from like there's a lot of this collage in particular, and I can move it a bit more this way, is to do with, you'll see, people may be able, this is Keith Haring. This is a picture of Keith Haring making his work on a wall. And I started including images of the artists themselves working on the art, and I sort of envision it as me creating the collage that's all around me. For example, in this piece, and I've been taking images from well-known artists. So there's Picasso. There's increasingly a lot of Picasso, a lot of Matisse. I was using a lot of images from pop artists as well. So there's Keith Haring. You can see this is Keith Haring. This is Keith Haring here. And when I'm working, what I've been focusing on is filling the plane of the work um, with color and imagery. And so I've been working more in a grid than I used to work. And I think I used to think that when if I worked in a grid and I just was putting sort of squares or rectangles together in a collage, that was like a simple way to work, and it felt like I wasn't doing enough or changing the work enough, the original work enough. And I think that what I realized with as I worked, and my work is always like the process itself is sort of experimental. I don't know if it's going to work, if I'm going to like something or not like something. And what I discovered was that if I work in a grid, I can actually create a much more complicated or complex final piece. It actually gives me more flexibility working that way than if I'm trying to fit together pieces. Um, and so I guess one of the things I would say about the finished work is that it's very dense. It's very rich. To some people, it feels very busy. And I think that there's a similar feeling with a lot of my writing, which is that it's very sort of dense and rich. And it's like, I think for some people, it's not intended to be taken in, either if it's a collage, a visual piece, or the writing itself all at one go. So for me, it's like it's the icing on the cupcake a little bit. And like you can just take a little taste, walk away, do something else, come back, look at it again, find something else in it that means something to you or that you find interesting. And, it's sort of that process of returning to the work, finding something new in it over and over, and not really it's sometimes it's like a little bit too much to be. I wouldn't expect anyone to sit down and read one of my collected, like, that I've put together books of work all at once. But when I've given the manuscript to friends, I had one friend who said to me, I don't know what I'm reading exactly, but I really enjoy it, and I keep coming back to it and reading a few pages at a time at random, and it's lovely. And that's like the nicest, kindest thing anybody could say to me, and that is sort of the intention of the work itself, which is that it's created somewhat at random, but not in a chaotic way. Like there's reason to the way it's put together and constructed on the page or otherwise. And it's going to mean something to different people. It's going to mean something different to different people. Art always does. Writing always does. We refer it back to ourselves and our stories. And I I guess I've been exploring identity in part because I have a dissociative disorder. And that's why I work in so many different mediums, is really that these different dissociated parts of myself have different interests and different abilities and different things they enjoy doing. And it's all me, but it's more separate than for most people. Um, so but it's also all very similar processes, whether I'm writing or doing the other art. Um, Thank you so much for coming to my home and letting me speak about my art and my work and share this little bit of time with you. Thank you, CTSB. It's been such a pleasure to be able to do this. I really appreciate it. Thank you. I'm Annie Kaye.